Welcome to the Yo Club podcast with your host, Erickson Sandoval. This podcast provides networking, education, and mentoring opportunities for all active duty, reserve, and veterans currently serving or have served as officers in the United States military, who also engage in various forms of investing, small business, real estate, and stocks. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Yo Club, an officer military investing podcast. And today I have with me Andrew Brazell, correct?
Yes.
Had to make sure I get that name right.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give a brief background to our listeners?
Andrew Brazell. I'm a officer of Marines, just like Erickson here. Here at Pensacola Naval Air Station for flight school, or originally that was the plan. We'll see if it actually pans out, but began my investing journey here when I landed in October of 2020. Have had quite a bit of downtime here at flight school for various reasons, some good, some bad, and have just kind of continued to scale in the downtime and continued networking and meeting great people like yourself and getting great advice and just kind of keeping the ball rolling. So
yeah, awesome. Thanks for being on the show, and I'm honored to have you on. So you got here in Pensacola of October 2020. Did you see yourself getting into real estate here, or did it just kind of happen?
I did see myself getting into real estate eventually, and while I was at TBS, my class was the first one to experience basically like a lot of downtime due to COVID and the unknowns that came along with that. So I sat in a dorm room on quarantine multiple times as people were getting COVID in the company and then, trying to progress through the training. But long story short, had a lot of downtime, listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books, and began my search for a property at my next duty station, which was going to be Pensacola. So found a property that we liked, and actually I got permission, I got leave approved while in TBS to come down to Pensacola to actually do the walkthrough of the property before making our offer. So that was kind of unheard of, but I made it very clear to my commander that this was important to me, and ended up missing mess night at TBS, but during COVID I heard it wasn't that great anyway. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, I know how hard that was to get to make happen. So good on you for being able to make that happen and at the end get that property. So where did the real estate stem from? Did that just come as a need, or you have family that kind of were already in real estate? How did it happen?
It actually started when I met a good friend of mine now, but at the time was just a rugby teammate in Denver, and he went on to do amazing things. He's the current CEO of Bigger Pockets, Scott Trench, but I had actually heard him. He toasted the team at one of our team socials at the beginning of the year, basically saying like, "Hey guys, I just want to celebrate closing my second property," and I'm not too old now, but I was younger then and he was younger than me. So I was pretty impressed, because to be able to break into a market like Denver, and especially to have multiple properties at his age, alarm bells were going off, and I was like, hey, I need to talk to this guy. So he kind of set me on the right path. I was in a pretty abysmal place financially. I had it was a 412 credit score at its worst. And he came into my apartment, basically gave me a bunch of homework, said, read this book. He gave me Richest Man in Babylon, and said, you need to finish this before I'm going to give you any more advice. I need to know you actually have skin in the game and you're intentional, not just, being a tire kicker and all that stuff. So devoured that book, and then he kind of instructed me on the next steps. But he had begun working at Bigger Pockets and was in the final stages of writing his book Set for Life. And so just kind of as a, hey, what the hell, he gave me an unedited version of his book and asked me to give him critiques. I think it was more of just like a, hey man, I'm giving you the tools. What are you going to do with it? Because by the time I got through the book, he had already published it. So really set me along the straight and narrow, if you will, as far as the potential that real estate has and where I should be putting my focus. So that's really what, that's how I caught the bug, if you will. So
for sure, that's awesome to have kind of like that mentor, that coaching, that guidance.
Oh, it's vital.
Yes, for sure, to help you get you to where you need to be. So, in the beginning, what was kind of like your strategy? Because I know you do a multitude of things. You do some Airbnb, short-term rentals, you do some arbitrage, you do some small and single family, you're working on a tiny home, and you're also working on a biodome. So in the beginning, what was that initial strategy for you when you were purchasing that home in Pensacola?
Easiest barrier to entry I kind of learned was doing the house hacking thing. That I think that might even be a term that Scott coined. But that's what I picked up from his book, and I was like, okay, this is the easiest way to get into the game, low down payment, especially with us, the VA loan. Like I knew that was going to be my entry into the space as far as real estate investing. So we did the first property with a VA loan, used a clever negotiating tactic to, offer a little bit more than the agreed upon price if the seller would cover the closing costs. And that way we were able to do our first deal, not only with no money out of pocket, but we actually walked away with like about $12,000 in hand, which was phenomenal. Had a good team. Cannot emphasize enough getting a referral for an agent for your first deal, especially if it's in an area that you're not familiar with. Like a lot of military people, we come into that scenario quite a bit, having a PCS often. So definitely use your resources, use your network, and find an agent who has experience in the area that you're moving to. So that's how we were able to get into the first property.
Awesome. That's amazing. And then in that market research that you were doing when you were picking out this property, how did you go about picking your criteria and the area and the location? And then what were you looking for in terms of the property itself?
Well, originally our plan was to long-term lease to flight students. I mean, I had this grandiose idea of, having a whole bunch of my flight student buddies in the house with us. We all having study groups, and, then for study breaks being able to walk downtown and, go grab a beer at a brewery or something like that. So that was the original plan. So my buy box, if you will, was as many units as possible for what I qualified for. And then I wanted close proximity to the downtown area. I had been to Pensacola multiple times during my time in the Air Force, and I kind of knew where the hot spots were in the city. So I wanted something that was close to the downtown area, but also centrally located between NAS Pensacola and NAS Whiting Field, which would be our next duty station. So pilot students, as you know, but just for our listeners, when they come down here, they split time between the base at NAS Pensacola and the base at Whiting Field. So at first you're at Pensacola, then once you've progressed through the first couple stages of the program, then you move up to NAS. So I figured it would be prudent to have a location that was kind of smack dab in the middle, so to preclude people from having to move multiple times. So that was kind of geographically how we narrowed down our search criteria. And then obviously like price point was the biggest thing. You can't get more than you qualified for. So that kind of narrowed it down for us.
Yeah, for sure. That makes complete sense. And I agree with you in terms of picking the right location. And then you even thought ahead. You were thinking, hey, they're not going to be here in Pensacola the whole time. So maybe I shouldn't buy right in Pensacola. Maybe find a happy medium to where you can get a larger customer base or client base or tenant base.
Well, the biggest thing is we wanted to reduce turnover. So, I have that access to that Facebook group for the housing, and I'm seeing guys, listing the same units about 6 months apart, because that's about how long the first phase of the training is. And we just didn't want a ton of turnover. If if we can minimize vacancy, then I figured that would cut down on one of our costs. So that was the idea for that.
And then once you closed on the property, you lived in it and started house hacking?
Yes. So the property that we got is built as a triplex. The original house had 2 additions onto it. So one of them was an office, and then the second one was actually a law office, which was a loft and had its own bathroom and kitchen in it. So we basically turned that front building into a duplex by just literally locking the door from the first addition into the second addition. And then my wife and I lived in the lofted area, and we were going to rent out the main house, which was a 2-1 or 3-1 if you count the office. And then there was a separate building out back, which was an upstairs and downstairs 1-bedroom apartment each. So we really got a quad if you look at it that way. So wife and I moved into the smallest unit because we're coming from Denver. I live downtown. I had a really small unit anyway, and we were used to that. And one of Scott's big things in his book was, really curb the lifestyle creep. So we didn't need to expand. We didn't have the furniture for a 2-1 anyway. So we just moved into the studio. Tried billing it out, tried advertising to Facebook, and we really weren't getting any hits from our target, demographic, our target market of the students. They all wanted to live near the beach or right next to the gate, and right next to the breweries and the bars and all that other stuff, and we weren't quite exactly where we thought would be attractive. So I had a little bit of experience doing Air BnB arbitrage in Denver, and so we had the furnishings for the entire house completed already, as we were looking to rent it out as a furnished offering. And so we were like, hey, let's just put it up on Airbnb until we get long term. And then we found out what a ripe opportunity a vacation market is, and we booked. Essentially, we were 100% booked for like the first 8 months that we opened, and so then we kind of saw the potential of Airbnb in this area, and that's when we decided, like, all right, we need to scale this. So at that point, it was basically off to the races.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your tenacity. You had a plan, it didn't go as planned, and you were able to pivot and come up with a creative idea, not only how to use the property, but being able to flex and change your strategy and target a different kind of audience because your original kind of avatar didn't work out. So that's amazing, man. Just being able to have that mindset of being able to flex and take the good and bad and solving that problem. So in terms of the mindset part, do you feel like you always had that, or do you say the education part kind of gave that to you, or would you say you had the ability to reach out to people like Scott and to get that mentorship to help you problem solve?
I think for me it was a bit of a combination of all those factors. I have always done my best to seize opportunity when I seize it, or when I see it, excuse me. That's kind of how I got down to this program anyway, was, a door opened and I was like, yeah, I absolutely want to pursue that. So, but then also it was, serendipitous, if you will, that I had run into people who kind of instructed me on how to do this. That's why, like, my biggest goal here in town is, just sharing the knowledge with people who are trying to, find a way into financial independence, especially the military people. So education is absolutely a part of it. But yeah, that tenacity and also just knowing when to pivot. But I will be, honest, we have the benefit of having, a salaried position with, at times a lot of downtime. So I know not everybody has that benefit. But the ability to, I guess, kind of recognize where your knowledge is lacking and then go pursue knowledge to fill those voids is something I've had a knack for ever since coming into real estate investing. If I don't know where to find it, I'll find a book that, will instruct me, or I'll hopefully just kind of send feelers out to the network and see if there are people who are a little more versed in what it is I'm lacking in. And I guess an ability to just ask questions and go from there is absolutely necessary, and something that I had no education in when I first started.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's good that, where you're weak at, and you know how to seek out and find help, because I feel like that's kind of a lot of the issues that newer investors have is not only do they not know what questions to ask, but they don't have the confidence to ask it because they don't want to seem like a beginner. And it's like, no, if you want to, progress and move up, you got to ask the questions. So, going back on the Airbnb, what was kind of the difference you saw between Denver and being here in Pensacola and running and operating that Airbnb? Especially multiple, since you were, I'm assuming that you Airbnb'd all the units, or just some of them and long-term the rest. How did you do that?
So we inherited leases in the separate building out back, the one-bedroom apartments. When we bought the property, there were existing leases on those. So really all we had to work with was the main house and then the law office that was an addition that my wife and I were living in. So we had one Airbnb to start, which was the 2-1. And then one of my tenants actually got orders to go. He actually got orders to go work with the SEALs, which was awesome. As a corpsman, that's like a dream job. So he came to me, really sheepishly, and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna have to break my lease. I'm really sorry." And I was like, "Dude, go do your thing. I'm so stoked for you. Like, that's awesome. And I'm not upset that you're breaking the lease, because I'm about to turn that into an Airbnb." So it worked out on all fronts. But yeah, once he left, we got in there, did some soft renovations, just basically paint and all that stuff, and then furnished it, and it booked the same day that we listed it. So and that was part of the I think we listed that one in March. So, roughly 5 months after we had moved in, we had our second unit up off the ground. So, and then that one was booked fairly solidly as well.
Wow, that's good. And in terms of, pivoting to the Airbnb, how was kind of like the change in tempo? Because long-term versus Airbnb or short-term rental, you're a lot more involved in the business.
Oh, absolutely.
So how were you able to manage that? And then what are some of the nuances that you had to deal with?
Yeah, so Airbnb is not passive income, not even a little bit. We're at a stage now where we have cleaning teams, and we have a manager who goes through the messages and all that stuff. So it's pretty low impact now. But at the get-go, we were doing everything. We were doing all the turnovers, we were doing all the messaging, we were doing all the furnishings, all the renovations, everything. So it was work. It was a full-time job, split between my wife and I. But at the time, we both basically had part-time jobs, because my wife, she works for herself, and I'm sure you guys will hear from Haley soon, but she does her own thing, so writes her own schedule and all that stuff. And then, we're only needed when we have training evolution. So we had quite a bit of time. But going back to your question about, the difference between Denver and Pensacola, Denver is, at the time, when I was getting into it, it wasn't quite the saturated market that, I guess the entire country is experiencing now with Airbnb units. So I stayed in an Airbnb in Denver when my girlfriend came into town, and we were talking to the owner, and she basically said, "Yeah, I was able to quit my job, and now I just have a couple Airbnbs that I turn over," and that blew my mind. I was like, "Are you kidding me? You live in downtown Denver and just work part-time cleaning? Like, that sounds a lot better than what I'm doing." At the time, I was working at a blood bank, which was absolutely miserable. But yeah, so that kind of turned me on to the potential that Airbnb has. So I had a roommate who was out of town all the time, and I was like, "Dude, let me list your room on Airbnb. I'll manage it, and you don't have to do anything, we'll split the income 50-50. And he's like, yeah, sure, sounds good. So that's kind of how I got my feet wet with Airbnb.
Gave him too much of a good deal.
Oh yeah, it was a phenomenal deal. I mean, it was great for me too, though. Like he's the one paying rent, but I'm taking half the money that he gets on Airbnb. So yeah, no, I thought that was a good deal for both of us. But that's really what turned me on to the income potential that you can get from having an Airbnb. So after, we were done living together, I got a studio apartment, and then I went and actually got another apartment downtown. And my strategy was like, just find a listing where the owner lives out of state, and then, they probably won't drop in and complain. And there was nothing in the lease that says I couldn't sublet or anything like that. So I wasn't, going behind anyone's back or breaking the law or anything. I just wanted to, hedge my bets and make sure that this wasn't going to come back on me. And then I was going to have a apartment full of furniture and, nothing to do with it. So that's how I got into doing like the arbitrage. But those were a little bit different in the sense that people who were coming to Denver at the time were usually coming like for 1 to 2 days. They were coming for a conference. They were coming for a concert. They were, coming to go skiing during the winter for a couple days or something like that. So it was low lead time and high turnover. So I made the majority of the money like in cleaning fees that I charged, and then obviously kept myself because that was my job. But here it's a little different. Like people will come for entire weekends or weeks at a time with their family because it's a vacation destination. And especially in the summer, we'll have lead time of a couple months. People will be, I just got a booking for June. Like people are already looking ahead to come down for their summer vacations and stuff. So it changes a little bit. But now Denver is they've actually enacted laws where, you can only own one Airbnb, and it has to be your primary home, and you can only rent it out like 6 months out of the year. So they're like, they have a housing crisis, so they had to do something. But what really is attractive about the entire Gulf Coast and, the panhandle of Florida and all that is this industry survived on short-term rentals for the last 60, 70 years. Like since the 40s and 50s, people have been coming here renting short-term. So I don't think that part is ever going to go away. Like the entire industry is propped up on short-term rentals. So that kind of protects, people who have short-term rentals in this area from any changes. And so it's more of a sure bet. And that's why we can keep scaling confidently, knowing like this isn't going to go away. As long as we do it right, like we should always have business. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, just everything that you managed to do, the arbitrage, the Airbnb pivot, and then you've, also managed to get into a single family with a little bit of addition. So it was a small multifamily, and you were able to use it as a small multifamily. And then next up, I know you're also working on a tiny home. So
yeah.
You want to kind of go over why you're going that route and, what inspired you to go that route and kind of just the ins and outs of the tiny home process.
Sure. Well, the first thing we did after getting that quad was a year later, we went to go get another primary. So I didn't want to use the VA loan because, as you know, there's a maximum like entitlement that you get. Actually, with the Navy Blue Water Act, there isn't, but I'm in the old system, so it's complicated. But we decided to get this property with it conventional because it was 3.5% for an FHA or 5% for a conventional primary. So we figured pay an extra 1.5%, and then when we get to the 20% equity, we get out from the PMI. So that made sense to us. We'll pay an additional 1.5%. Got this property, and the reason we went with this one is because the garage was converted into a master bedroom. So they put a large bedroom with a bathroom. But since it was a garage, it had a door to the outside existing. And so we just basically walled off the door from that bedroom into the main house and turned it into a little studio Airbnb. So yes, it's a single family, but we basically, have an addition onto it, and that's actually the best performing Airbnb unit we have in the city. So Haley took the reins on that one, decorated it really nice. It was only a studio, so there wasn't a ton to furnish, which was nice. But it's been at the top of the search results for that size unit ever since we opened.
It's good that, again, you're showing this creativity, this ability to pivot and change and basically find the best use of that property, whether it's a single family home or a small multi-family home, or just a single family home with a couple additions on there. So, you're also working on, I hear, a biodome or something along those lines as well. Yeah.
So I kind of fell down the rabbit hole of creative finance, Sub2, all that other stuff after hearing a podcast in November with Pace Morby, and ended up jumping into his mentorship and learning a ton. But since then, we've got 2 seller finance properties, and I'm working on the 3rd right now, which is a dome. I'm not sure it's going to go through. The seller is asking way too much, and after I made my last offer, he just decided to jack up the price on his listing an extra $200,000. So I'm not sure it's going to go through. But yeah, it was it's a concrete dome. Super cool how they build these things. They basically pour a circle, a circular foundation, and then tack a weather balloon around the edges, inflate the balloon, spray the inside of the balloon with foam, and then hang rebar on the inside. There's like 8 miles of rebar lattice on the inside of this thing, and then they spray shotcrete, which is like a concrete that comes out of a hose essentially, and they spray 3 inches of concrete on the inside. So you've got 3 inches of concrete surrounding 8 miles of rebar. The thing's a damn bomb shelter. It's pretty cool, but it's on the water. It's near the base. I've made 2 creative offers on it with, escalation clause, basically saying like, if you'll accept this much, I'll give you this much in interest, and I give him more money in a purchase price if he will increase, the time that I can pay it off before the balloon, and then also decrease the interest rate. So it's pretty easy to understand when you see it on paper. I understand hearing it might not make sense, but that's how I was able to acquire the last 2 properties. One of them, a duplex in this neighborhood, saw the sign in the yard probably the same day that they put it in, because it's on my commute and I hadn't noticed it earlier. So pulled into the driveway, called the seller. She came out. She was in the garage. We talked. I made an offer at their asking price, if they were willing to sell or finance it. And she said, no, we're not interested in that. So I was like, okay, well, I tried. About 2 weeks later, she called me back. She's like, hey, everybody's lowballing us. Like, we're wanting to sit down and see if maybe we could work this out. So we did. At the time, interest rates were like in the mid 5s. And we were able to lock it up for 3%.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, I mean it worked out, and that's our newest. That's our baby, if you will. It's a duplex, a 3-2 on either side. We, completely gutted. We didn't do it, but we got it completely renovated. It had been completely gutted, and now it's furnished really nice. Like, as we're able to scale, we're able to increase the quality of our units as we open them. And it's we call it the villa. It can sleep up to 30 people. So we're getting we've had a soccer team from Europe stay there. We've had a little league football team stay there. We've had 2 family reunions and a couple weddings there so far, but it's doing quite well. And the next one that I got seller finance was a property downtown. It's on a Keystone lot, which, long story short, the land that it's abutting is basically useless because it's too small and you can't access it, properly without having my property. So when the developers that are building all around us want to acquire the land that I'm situated on, they'll have to talk to myself as well as the other sellers. So we're going to try to band together and hold out for the best price. That property has it has a single family home as well as the tiny home that you're talking about. So the single family home is already renting enough to cash flow on the property. And then I'm working on doing a couple additions to the tiny home. There's an external shower hanging on a palm tree, which is great, during the summer, but during the winter here, it's not ideal. So we're trying to put a shower in there and extend the lofts so that they can accompany a king size bed instead of just a twin and, a couple other things. But that's going to be my first tiny home experience. But those two buildings only occupy the first half of the lot. So on the back half of the lot, I'm looking to do some container homes and looking at the zoning and all that stuff to see if that's something we're going to be able to do. So that's what's in the future for now. But
yeah, that's amazing. And again, like your confidence and your ability to just see the opportunity and seize it. Like, again, I just want to mention how like that's a must and is necessary in real estate. And you don't necessarily need it, because you can keep it simple and just do single family homes and keep doing that over and over and over until you get the passive income that we spoke about earlier, and then just leave it at that. But for you see the potential in these unique stays. You're looking at your market and seeing what people are wanting, what kind of amenities. So you're trying to implement these things, basically appealing to your customer base. And, the other thing I want to ask you about is when it comes to your team. First you started off with a team, using an agent, using that agent as a medium. Now you've kind of pivoted to where you're talking direct to sellers. How was that shift? How did you build the confidence to talk directly to sellers? And then how, what kind of negotiations are you doing that you feel really helped you get them to believe in you and see you as a credible buyer versus just someone off the street? Yeah,
good question. I think it's like anything when you first get into something new, like your confidence is not quite there. But the only way you can increase it is reps, right? Like having made multiple offers on properties, kind of understanding how the whole negotiation process goes, just understanding a lot of seller motivations helps a lot. What I did for this last property that I got seller financing was I really was just trying to improve on my negotiation skills. So I thought, what's an easy way to actually do that is by, like I said, getting reps. So I went to Zillow and I looked at all of the for sale by owner listings and I called every single one of them. I mean, I say that like there's thousands, but there's only 11 at the time. So I call 11 phone numbers and I talked to 7 sellers, and 4 of them were willing to show me the property like that week. So I went and I walked 4 properties and I talked to sellers, and one guy was upside down in a renovation. He just needed to get out from under it. He said he would be willing to seller finance it if I gave him enough of a down payment to pay off his hard money loan, which was like $300,000. Obviously, for the level of deals I'm doing, that was more than like 40%. So at that point, it makes no sense. I just go to a bank, right? So you do it enough, and I ended up finding 2 who said they'd be willing to seller finance the property, and one of them was a good property, and I ended up putting that one under contract. So originally, it was just me wanting to practice my negotiating skills by actually talking to owners. And the easiest way to find that was for sale by owner listings. And then, one of these ended up actually panning out. So I'm constantly scouring that. I know my mentor, a guy I learned most of the stuff from, Pace Morby, says like you're wasting your time if you go to FSBO or for sale by owner. But I've found one, and I think that was more than just beginner's luck. So I'll continue to look at that as a resource. But No, as far as just improving, you have to be willing to put offers out there. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. Most likely they will counter, and if they counter at something that you can handle, then you might have a deal in your hands. You really just have to be willing to put yourself out there. Long story short, like you have to get over the nervousness of the seller might be insulted if they're wanting to sell it, and even the fact that they've gotten an offer is movement a lot of times. Like especially in the market now, houses are on the market a lot longer. You might not get the deal, but the seller may be able to leverage your offer into getting a better one. And this isn't a zero-sum game. Like a rising tide raises all ships. So if you can help real estate in the area, I mean, you're most likely going to boost the value of your own property. So don't think that making an offer is a bad thing, even if they don't go with you. It will most likely pan out. Like you'll get the property that you want, and the area as a whole will have risen in an ideal situation. So
for sure, and I completely agree with you. And from all that you said, it's just a matter of getting that education, but not only getting that education, but taking action with that education.
Absolutely.
So for you, you've done a multitude of different things. What's kind of your end goal for all this? Is there a financial freedom number, or is it more now as a business to you where you just want to scale as far as you can go? What's the end goal for you?
Great question. Originally, I think I had started this with the idea of financial independence and wanting the opportunity to walk away from the military if that was what I wanted to do by the end of our first contract. So I wanted to leave it open-ended, and I was hoping to make a career out of it, but I just wanted to give myself options. So originally, I thought it was a better use of my time than going to the beach, drinking beer, and getting fat like a lot of the flight students here. So I figured that was a better use of my time. Started off, and it kind of took off, and we fell in love with it, and then realized that it has a potential to supplement our income. We make decent money, better than the enlisted, no question. But it's still not amazing money if you're trying to raise a family and have a good life and have some travel and all that stuff. So it was just the perfect combination. So that's why we got into it originally. I think now the reason we're getting into it more is we're really nailing down our systems and processes, and we're not at the point yet where we can walk away from it and, kind of wash our hands of it and let it run itself. But we see that like in the near future. So as we've been able to scale, we are essentially firing ourselves from more and more jobs. When we first started, we were doing all the messaging, all the cleaning, all that stuff. And now we have cleaning teams, we have people to manage our messaging, and I'm having people send me deals regarding, potential new acquisitions. So I'm not having to hunt for them as much, which is phenomenal. So eventually, I'd like to hire somebody in acquisitions, just, hire to go higher, if you will. The more people we bring on, not only are we paying people, salaried wage and all that other stuff, which is great for the community and the industry, but we're able to kind of step back a little bit ourselves, which is ideal. So the vision for it is, to just have this thing run itself. That's the end goal.
Yeah, I agree. So the more passive you can make it, the better it is for you in terms of getting your time back and doing what you want to do and getting what you want out of life.
Yeah, I mean, that was why we found it so attractive in the first place. I think that's why a lot of people get into it, is the idea of passive income. Making money while you sleep is really attractive. You can buy your life back, if you will.
For sure, and that's exactly true. So for our listeners, how can they get a hold of you? You got any websites? Go ahead and let us know the best way to get a hold of you, any courses or services you provide, and then I'll be sure to get all that information and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Instagram at Drew Brazz. That's DREWBRAZ. Just kind of a shortened version of my name. And then we have a website, springboardinvestment.com, where you can direct book with any of our current listings, and then also see future investment opportunities. I think the next stage in the game for us will be taking on private money and all that type of stuff. So still getting into the weeds of all that. Not even sure I can actually advertise that yet, unless you're an accredited investor. I'm still learning. So that's kind of the next foray for us. But yeah, that's where you can find us.
Yeah, awesome. And again, thanks for being on the show. It was an honor to have you, and I'm glad to see the success you're having, and I can't wait to see where you take it. Thanks for listening to the Yo Club, a military officer investing podcast. You can find us at www.militaryoclub.com or on Facebook searching the Yo Club, Military Officer Investors Network. Have a great day.